Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome here at Crypto Hash Review, where we educate and disseminate information about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies from a Muslim perspective. And here we want to discuss about money and the divisibility of different types of money. So starting with the first one, which is debt. Debt is information, and it is effectively infinitely divisible. Infinitely divisible. And that's primarily because there is no unit to record a debt. Debts are subjective. We measure debt by referencing different things. But effectively, I could say to you, brother, by the way, you see that debt you owe me yesterday, or you owe me last year, that £100 debt, or whatever debt you owe me. You owe me a day's worth of work, for example. Don't worry, I've forgiven you 99.999999999% of it. Here, write it down. And that will be recorded as your debt effectively forgiven, other than that 0.000000001% of it. So debts are infinitely divisible, So that gets a 5 out of 5. As for items and commodities, then no. Some commodities or some items, depending on what it is, have a unit, a single base unit that you can't divide any less than that. So for example, shells that they were using in the past, or beads, or mammoth's tooth, or something like that. There comes a point where you can't divide it anymore, otherwise it becomes worthless. If you broke a shell in half, you may have someone who will take half a shell, or break that again and break that again. Eventually we get fragments and no one even know what it is, and it's now useless. So items and commodities, excluding metallic ones, its divisibility has limits. So we'll give it a 3 out of 5. Actually, now I'll give it a 2 out of 5, because generally speaking, commodities, the actual thing will be the whole thing will be the unit. You don't really think of it less than that. But as for gold, as we mentioned to you before, gold is, they call it infinitely malleable. Infinitely malleable. You can move and squish and squeeze gold in all different ways. But practically speaking, if I was to go to the marketplace and also sell or to use a piece of gold, what's the likelihood of someone going to have a clipper on them to clip off a piece of a piece of gold and take it? You could do that, but there comes a point where, just like commodities, it becomes impractical to divide. So for example, if I wanted to spend 1p of a piece of gold, the size of that piece of gold would make it impossible to use. It'd probably even be like a speck or a dust, something infinitely small. No one would accept that as a payment. So gold does have limits whereby you can't really go any smaller than that. Yes, it is infinitely malleable. Yes, you could break pieces off, but just like commodities and items, there comes a limit whereby it just doesn't make sense anymore, especially as a means of exchange, medium exchange. So we'll give gold a bit more than commodities because of the malleability involved in gold. So we'll give it a 3. I know it's going to upset some gold bugs out there, because there's always that thing of, oh, you can always break gold down into smaller pieces and blah, blah, blah. And they have these tiny little bars of gold. But even those tiny little bars of gold are probably like £80. I want to spend only £1. I'm going to break that £1 off of that tiny little bar. So it's 3 out of 5. Then we have fiat money. Now, fiat money, being what it is, something that's just made up by the governments who issued them, fiat money does have the potential to be infinitely malleable, but in practice, it's not always like that. So let me give you an example. When countries like Zimbabwe had hyperinflation, they kept having to rebase their money. So the numbers were getting so high, like 1 million became $1 trillion, became so high they had to rebase the thing. Basically meaning that they had to remove some numbers, and then this is a new currency. So you can always reissue your currency. So if you wanted to have, for example, you got a pound, you got a penny. If you wanted to have a tenth of a penny, you can always just readjust the whole economy to now make a pound worth £10, and 1p now worth £1, and then this. Now you can always do these things, but that requires a mammoth task of changing the whole currency. That doesn't exist naturally. Naturally, pounds, dollars, whatever, they have their units set. They have their main base unit, like your dollar or your pound. You usually have your subunit, which is usually in pence or cents, and it usually just split up into hundreds. That's it. So its divisibility is very weak, actually. It can't go less than that. So you can't do things like transactions. I can't pay you fractions of a penny for whatever reason. So I would give it a 3, probably even a 4, because it's probably more useful than gold in terms of a daily exchange. But it's only because it was set that way. If, for example, whatever reason, there was deflation on a massive scale, whereby the price of money goes up, not down, then they'll just rebase it. So I will give it maybe a 4, a bit more than gold, but I want to give it a 5. As for Bitcoin, then Bitcoin has what's called a satoshi, and a satoshi is a small piece of Bitcoin. It is exactly 0.000000001 Bitcoin. So there's like 8 zeros. So that is the smallest unit of a Bitcoin, and it's known as a satoshi. And I think at the moment, 1 cent, 1 US cent is 24 satoshis. So that's kind of the unit at the moment is. But as you know, the value of the dollar compared to Bitcoin is dropping fast. So maybe today it's 24 satoshis per cent. Maybe by the time you watch the video, it'll be 10 satoshis for a cent. And maybe one day in the near future, $1 or 1 cent will equal 1 satoshi. Who knows? There are definitely other currencies on planet Earth where that is the case. I think it was Iran, where 1 satoshi was equals to their one whole currency. I don't know what it's called, or I think it was real or whatever it is. Satoshis do exist, and therefore you can use things like microtransactions. Now via the Lightning Network, which we haven't discussed later on, we haven't discussed it yet, but Lightning Network, you can even do sub-Satoshi units. But so Bitcoin, in terms of divisibility, it is very good. But if Bitcoin's price in dollars goes really high, then you may have days when 1 satoshi is actually equal to a pound, and therefore you have to use a second layer solution to get even sub-satoshi units. But the point is, 1 Bitcoin has a very small decimal limit, and it makes it a lot more divisible as a unit. So for that, we'll give it a 5 out of 5. Actually, I'll give it a 4.5 out of 5. And the only reason why I do so is because, like we said, if Bitcoin does become £10 million or £1 million per Bitcoin, then that small, tiny, infinitesimal Satoshi will actually be worth quite a lot. Anyway, we hope you find this video very useful and very informative. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you want to give us a shout or have a talk with us about anything you need help with, you can find out our contact details on our website, cryptohashreview.com. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.